After Charlie Kirk being assassinated, the world is groaning with pains. So many people with division causing strife and turmoil, fighting left and right, never seeming to end the pain and suffering. What in the world is going on? And we look to something higher and above and we think, why in the world are these things happening? I encourage you to not lose hope and to go to God during these difficult questions, during these difficult times. And that's why I want to pull up John Lennox here. He explains this so beautiful. Why does evil happen in a time where there's a loving God?
Very interesting. Even this week, I've been asked to speak on the problem of evil twice out of 4. Because I find that people are hurting, they're looking for answers, and they find their friends suffering either with a natural catastrophe like a brain tumor, or they're raped, or they're abused in some way, and they're desperately trying to come to terms with it. I find it a very hard problem. It's the hardest problem I face. And I do not think atheism solves it, except in a fairly trivial way. It says, well, that's just how the world is. But you see, what atheism doesn't do is it doesn't remove the pain and the suffering. And I'm faced very often with people who've just been given a few weeks to live or months to live. And they want answers. They want to put this into a big picture, and I can understand that. And if I didn't feel there was any way into this question, I wouldn't sit here for a millisecond. I wouldn't sit here for a millisecond. Because my heart really goes out to people who are on the rough end of suffering. And the problem with our world is that we can argue about God being all good, all powerful, and if he was this, he could do that. And none of us has ever been satisfied with that kind of an argument, as I think you were essentially pointing out. And that's because when we've done all the philosophical arguing, we're presented with two things that I call beauty and barbed wire. We're presented with a mixed world and a mixed picture. And we have to try to make sense of it. Now, I would claim that atheism superficially appears to have a solution, but deep down has no solution because it leaves the suffering. The suffering doesn't go away, but it removes all hope. And to come as rapidly as I can to the point, because I think this is a huge question and deserves a lengthy time devoted to it. I arrived in Christchurch, New Zealand, 2 days after the earthquake. I had to meet people who lost their husbands or their wives, and every interview I did on radio and television was earthquakes, why? And that's a very difficult question, because earthquakes are necessary for the preservation of human life. And when you factor that in, there comes a huge question. Could God not have made a world in which this kind of thing doesn't happen? Couldn't he have made a world in which human beings don't do these awful things to one another? Well, the answer to the latter question is, of course he could. We can make such worlds. They're called robotic worlds, but there are no humans in them. We're wishing ourselves out of existence if we say, could God not have made a world in which people are incapable of doing evil? Because evil is the flip side of the capacity to do good. And so the deep question for me is this. Granted that there's beauty in barbed wire, is there any evidence anywhere in the universe that there is a God who could be trusted with it? And my very brief answer, Betsy, to that is this, that at the heart of Christianity, there is a cross. And whatever that tells you, if the central claim of Christianity is correct, that Jesus is God incarnate, then that's God on a cross. And I ask myself the question, what's God doing on a cross? Well, one thing it tells you is that God has not remained distant from the problem of human suffering, but has himself become part of it. Now, if that were the end of the story, I would have nowhere to go. But it's not the end of the story. The central evidence for the truth of Christianity is the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. And that opens up the huge possibility that ultimately justice is going to be done. And when we're talking about ethics and morality, this, to my mind, is the most important factor in the situation, that justice is going to be done. And I put it to Richard Dawkins, that just is the first thing that comes into my head, and he said, well, I fight for justice in this life. I said, so do I, but Richard, you've no ultimate hope of justice, so that the vast majority of people who've ever lived never a justice in this life. And there's no future existence for them to get justice in, so they're never going to get justice. And their cry for justice from the gas chambers of Auschwitz or anywhere else is proved to be an illusion. I simply don't believe that. And I believe there's evidence that the contrary is true. There is a God who will ultimately do fairness. So I think that's not a solution to the problem of evil. But I believe it's a powerful way in because I've seen it change lives and give people hope. For justice.
Wow. So good. In the midst of the chaos, God met you in your suffering. He knows what you're going through. He died on the cross. He went through the most excruciating suffering and pain that you could ever imagine. If you suffered, he suffered so that you can have hope in Jesus. That's the beautiful thing about having a relationship with Jesus. Yeah, if you want to go down that route of being an atheist and there's nothing ever happening after this world, there's still suffering. And you still got to deal with it. There's no hope after you die either. There's no judgment. There's no people paying for the wrongs that they've done. But if there's a God who truly loves you, who truly cares, who made you, who created you, who has designed you for a purpose, your suffering does not go unnoticed. Your suffering is seen and heard, and God cares for you. And you can have hope that one day you will be with Jesus when you do pass away. So I encourage you to go to Jesus today. Know that he loves you and he's longing to have a relationship with you. In the description below, you can click a link to help you to decide to follow Jesus for the first time. I encourage you to do that today.